Betrayal within friendships can hit harder than anything, especially when it's someone you trust. Imagine watching a friend drift away, only to realize they've been trashing your name behind your back while pretending everything is fine. That's exactly what happened when I found out that my best friend, who had been acting like everything was normal, had been spilling lies and half-truths about me online to gain sympathy. But the worst part, she had no idea that I knew the truth until I decided to take action. This is the story of how I took back control and confronted the betrayal head-on. At first, everything seemed perfectly fine. My friend and I had been inseparable for years, and the bond we shared felt unbreakable. We'd gone through thick and thin together, supported each other through tough times, and celebrated the good ones. So when she started dating this guy, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. I didn't want to be that friend who immediately judged her choices, especially since I knew how much she valued her independence and freedom. But deep down, I couldn't shake off this unsettling feeling. I had my reservations about him from the beginning. Something about the way he carried himself didn't sit right with me. But rather than voicing my concerns, I kept them to myself, respecting her decision to make her own choices. My therapist even reminded me that sometimes people go through personal struggles that can affect their judgment, and that this was likely just a phase. I told myself I needed to be understanding and give her the space to figure things out on her own. Still, despite my efforts to stay neutral, there was a nagging feeling in my gut that something was off. Every time we hung out, there was this strange tension in the air, almost like I was walking on eggshells. I noticed subtle changes in her behavior. She wasn't as available as she used to be, and the times we did spend together started feeling more like a routine than genuine connection. She'd often cancel plans, and when we did hang out, it was as if her mind wasn't entirely present. But I kept convincing myself it was just a phase. She was adjusting to the new dynamics of her relationship, and I needed to give her time. There were moments where she'd reassure me, saying things like, "I miss you, we need to hang out more," and "let's plan something soon." It sounded sincere, and I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that everything was fine between us. After all, we were still friends, right? And the fact that we made plans to hang out, despite everything, seemed like a good sign. But deep down, something wasn't adding up. I couldn't help but feel like I was losing her, and it was a feeling I couldn't ignore for much longer. At the time, I brushed it off as me being paranoid or overthinking. After all, she had every right to focus on her relationship and live her life the way she saw fit. Still, there was this growing unease within me. Something wasn't right. And I could feel the storm brewing on the horizon, even if I wasn't fully aware of just how bad it was going to get. The tension between my friend and I didn't just stay in the background for long. It started creeping into every conversation, every interaction, until it became impossible to ignore. At first, it was subtle. The little things that would happen when we hung out, comments that felt off, or moments where I could tell she wasn't being fully honest with me. I told myself it was nothing, that maybe she was just distracted by her relationship, or maybe I was just being too sensitive. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was slowly unraveling. The first sign of trouble came when she started making little remarks that seemed to cut deeper than they should have. I remember one time we were talking about her boyfriend. And out of nowhere, she said, "Not everyone gets you, but at least he does." It stung more than I expected it to. It wasn't just the fact that she was comparing me to him. It was the way she said it, like I was some kind of problem she had to deal with. I could tell she was shifting her loyalty, and it felt like she was beginning to see me as less important. And I couldn't figure out why. I tried to brush it off as a one-time thing, a slip of the tongue, but the cracks started appearing more frequently. Another time, we were catching up over coffee, and I shared something personal, something that had been weighing on me for a while. I expected her to offer support, to listen like she always had. But instead, she just gave me this half-hearted response, something along the lines of, "Well, maybe you should just get over it." It was the kind of thing you say when you too wrapped up in your own world to notice that someone else is struggling. And I felt completely unseen. But I still held on to the belief that maybe I was overthinking it all. Relationships change, people grow apart. It's a natural part of life. So I kept pushing forward, trying to keep things normal, trying to remind myself that she was going through her own things with her boyfriend. Maybe this was just a rough patch, something that would pass with time. But then came the Reddit posts. The first time I saw it, I thought it was a mistake. I thought I must have stumbled upon something that wasn't meant for me to see. I had never been one to snoop through her things, but I had somehow ended up on a Reddit thread where she was talking about our friendship. It wasn't just a passing mention, it was an entire post, venting about the struggles she was having with me. At first, I couldn't believe it. This was the person I had trusted with everything, the one who had been my confidant for years, now airing our personal issues to strangers on the internet. As I scrolled through her post, my stomach twisted in knots. She was painting me as the villain in our friendship, making it sound like I was the one who had changed, the one who was being difficult. She didn't even mention any of the moments where she had been dismissive or where I had tried to be there for her and got pushed away. She didn't talk about how her relationship had slowly started taking over her life or how I had tried to respect her space. Instead, she made it sound like I was the one who was holding her back from happiness. The omissions were glaring and the distortion of the truth was heartbreaking. I couldn't just sit back and pretend it didn't hurt anymore. She had crossed a line. This wasn't a small disagreement or a minor misunderstanding. This was her telling strangers a one-sided version of our friendship, and it wasn't the truth. The worst part. She didn't even seem to realize that by doing this, she was betraying the very friendship she claimed to care about. She wasn't looking for advice or understanding. She was playing the victim in a story she had carefully constructed, leaving me to look like the bad guy. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was just venting, maybe she was angry or upset, and didn't know how to deal with her emotions. But the more I thought about it, the more it became clear. This was deliberate. She wanted people to see me in a negative light, to sympathize with her, and ultimately to turn against me. And as I kept reading the responses from Redditors, who were calling her out on her half-truths and even telling her she was in the wrong, I started realizing that I wasn't crazy. She was trying to manipulate the situation and, in doing so, had made it clear that our friendship meant very little to her. I didn't know what to do with this information. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to scream, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" But I knew that wasn't the right approach, not yet. I needed to gather more evidence, understand her true intentions, and decide how I was going to handle this betrayal. But one thing was clear. The person I thought I knew was slipping away, and in her place, someone I didn't recognize was emerging. And that hurt more than I was willing to admit. As the days went on, I found myself stuck in this toxic limbo. I knew I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine, but I also knew that confronting her immediately would only escalate things. And I wasn't ready to deal with the fallout just yet. I wanted to give myself time to process everything, to make sure I wasn't overreacting, and to figure out the best course of action. But every time I saw one of her posts, every time I found another Reddit thread where she twisted the narrative, the more I realized this wasn't a phase. This wasn't just a brief moment of venting. This was something far deeper and more intentional. It started to become clear. She wasn't just upset or confused. She was actively working to destroy my image in the eyes of strangers, people who had no idea who I really was, who had no context for the friendship we'd shared for years. She was crafting a story that made her out to be the victim and me the villain, and that realization felt like a gut punch. What hurt the most wasn't the fact that she was airing our dirty laundry. It was that she was doing it with such malicious intent. I kept track of her posts, screenshotting the ones that were particularly hurtful or dishonest. I knew I had to gather evidence. These weren't just fleeting complaints. This was an ongoing smear campaign. Every time she posted something, I would sit there, seething with anger, trying to hold my emotions in check. The posts were more than just vague complaints. They were carefully crafted stories meant to garner sympathy. She would omit key details, painting herself as the misunderstood one, while I was being cast as the problem in our friendship. I could see the pattern, and it became undeniable. She was deliberately trying to turn people against me. It wasn't just about what she was saying, it was how she was doing it. She wasn't trying to work things out with me directly. She wasn't coming to me to discuss the issues in our friendship like an adult would. Instead, she was venting to strangers, hoping to get validation and sympathy from a faceless crowd, all while pretending to be perfectly fine when she saw me in person. It felt like a game to her, a twisted game where she could play the victim and manipulate the narrative however she wanted, without having to face the consequences of her actions. And it hurt me that she thought she could get away with it, that she didn't even care enough to be honest with me. The worst part of all of this wasn't even the posts themselves. It wasn't the fact that she had been so openly deceptive, it was that, when I saw her in real life, everything appeared to be business as usual. She would text me saying things like, "I miss you so much, we need to hang out soon." Or, "Let's plan a movie night. I really want to spend time with you." It was as though nothing had changed. She acted like we were still the same two best friends who could talk about anything, who'd hang out and laugh for hours without a care in the world. It was surreal, almost like she was living in a completely different reality, one where everything was fine and I was just supposed to go along with it, but I wasn't falling for it anymore. I began to feel like I was stuck in a toxic limbo, constantly walking on eggshells, never knowing what was real and what was just part of her game. Every time she would send a text or act like everything was fine, I would remember the posts, the lies, the way she'd twisted the truth to paint me as the villain. It was almost like she was gaslighting me, convincing me that the reality I knew didn't exist and that I was the problem. And it made me question myself, am I overreacting? Is it really that bad? But deep down I knew it was. I knew this wasn't just a rough patch. This was something far more insidious. I didn't know how much longer I could keep pretending that I didn't see what was going on. I tried to ignore it, to bury my feelings, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized how unhealthy this whole situation had become. I was emotionally drained, stuck in a constant cycle of confusion and hurt, unable to break free because she kept pretending nothing was wrong. I felt like I was the only one who could see the truth, but I also felt paralyzed by the fear of what would happen if I confronted her. Would it destroy whatever was left of our friendship? Would it make her even more hostile toward me? The more I saw her acting as though nothing had changed, the more I felt like I was being played. It was as if she was living in a world where she could be two different people, one who pretended to be my best friend and one who talked behind my back to strangers. And I was expected to just go along with it, to ignore the hurt and the lies, and pretend like everything was fine. But I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't let her continue playing this game, manipulating me and everyone around her. I knew I had to confront her, but I wasn't sure how. Part of me wanted to just call her out on everything, bring up the posts, the lies, and the way she'd been pretending everything was fine. But another part of me feared that doing so would only make things worse, that it would push her further away and make me look like the crazy one. I had been holding on to this friendship for so long, but at this point, it felt like it was already slipping through my fingers. I wasn't sure if I could salvage it anymore, and part of me wondered if I even wanted to. One thing was clear, though. I wasn't going to let her continue to drag me through this emotional mess. I wasn't going to keep pretending everything was fine while she continued to tear me down behind my back. The unraveling had already started, and I had to face it head on, even if I didn't know where it would lead. By this point, I had reached a breaking point. It wasn't just the subtle digs or the occasional uncomfortable conversation anymore. It was the blatant lies she was posting online, the way she was working to tear me down to people who didn't know the first thing about our friendship. The realization hit me hard. I couldn't keep playing the role of the understanding, passive friend who just quietly accepted the situation. I was tired of swallowing my hurt and pretending that things were fine when they were clearly falling apart. I had tried to rationalize her behavior. Maybe she was going through something, maybe she didn't realize the full extent of what she was doing. But deep down, I knew the truth. She was actively choosing to hurt me. She wasn't just venting her frustrations or working through some temporary issues. She was making a conscious decision to manipulate the narrative, to twist things in her favor. Every post, every sly comment she made online, it all pointed to one thing. She was more invested in being seen as the victim than actually dealing with the mess she had created between us. At some point, I realized that I couldn't keep letting her get away with it. Couldn't she just stand by while she shredded my reputation to strangers and acted like everything was fine when we spoke in person? I didn't want to keep pretending that I could just let it slide, that maybe it wasn't that big of a deal. It was a big deal. My trust was broken, and every time I saw her continue to manipulate the situation, the more I felt like I was losing myself. I had allowed her to have so much control over my emotions, over the way I viewed myself, and it needed to stop. The hardest part of it all wasn't even the betrayal itself. It was the fact that I had allowed it to happen for so long. I had kept quiet, hoping that the tension would just magically disappear or that we could fix things without confronting the real problem. But I had come to realize that this wasn't something that could be ignored or wished away. The truth was, I had been holding on to a friendship that had already started to decay, and I wasn't doing myself any favors by pretending otherwise. I needed to make a decision. Would I continue to let her use me as a punching bag for her online drama, or would I take back control of the situation and confront her head-on? I knew that confrontation was inevitable. It had been building for weeks. I had let things slide for long enough. But the question remained, when and how would I do it? With graduation looming, I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want our final days before leaving college to be tainted by drama or anger. There was so much else to focus on, so many other things that needed my attention in those final weeks. I wanted to walk away from college with my dignity intact, without dragging out unnecessary conflict. But at the same time, I couldn't just let her continue lying and manipulating me, pretending that we were still the same close friends we had once been. I couldn't allow myself to be used like that any longer. As I mulled over my options, the weight of it all started to feel overwhelming. Confrontation was inevitable, but I was terrified of how it would play out. What if it ruined everything? What if I was the one who came off as unreasonable? Would she even take responsibility for what she had done? Or would she just twist the situation even further? I had already seen her manipulate people online, so how would she react when confronted with the truth? But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I couldn't let the fear of how things might unfold stop me from taking action. I had to stand up for myself, even if it meant shaking things up. Graduation was just around the corner, and this toxic dynamic needed to be addressed before it followed me into the next chapter of my life. I wasn't going to carry this burden with me, pretending everything was fine while she continued to play both sides. There was no perfect time to do it, no perfect way to approach it. I couldn't wait for the right moment when things felt less chaotic. That moment wasn't going to come. If I wanted to take back control, I had to act now. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me any longer, and I wasn't going to sit back while she continued to make me the villain in a story I wasn't even part of. In my gut, I knew I had to do it before graduation. There was no way I could walk across that stage knowing I had let this situation slide any longer. I needed closure. And even though the thought of confrontation filled me with anxiety, it became clear that I couldn't continue to hold on to a friendship that no longer existed. I had to let go. It wasn't about getting revenge, it was about reclaiming my peace and moving on from the toxic relationship. As I prepared myself for the conversation, I didn't know exactly how it would go. I didn't know what her reaction would be or how the fallout would affect our social circle. But I knew this, I was no longer going to be a passive participant in my own story. I wasn't going to let her keep writing a narrative where I was the villain. I had to take control, to speak my truth, and to stop letting her manipulate me. The friendship had already unraveled beyond repair. Now it was time to face it head-on and finally set myself free. By May 18th, everything was going to change. The date had been looming in the back of my mind for weeks, and by the time it arrived, I knew that I couldn't put off the inevitable any longer. The time for silence and passive acceptance was over. This wasn't about seeking revenge, it was about reclaiming my own peace, standing up for myself, and finally confronting the betrayal that had been festering for far too long. I had been holding on to a friendship that wasn't even close to what it once was, and it was time to face the truth. I had spent the last few weeks carefully documenting everything, screenshotting posts, saving conversations, keeping track of the lies and omissions that she had made online. I had gathered all the receipts, each one more painful than the last, but they were the proof I needed. The moment of confrontation was drawing near, and I had to be ready. I couldn't afford to be caught off guard or emotional. This wasn't about lashing out, it was about calmly and firmly laying out everything I knew, holding her accountable for her actions, and finally closing the door on this toxic friendship. I spent the days leading up to that moment preparing myself mentally and emotionally. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew she would likely try to twist things, deny what I had seen, or even accuse me of overreacting. She was good at deflecting, at playing the victim, and I had to be prepared for whatever she threw at me. But deep down, I knew I couldn't let her manipulate me any longer. This was my turn to take control of the narrative. I spent hours thinking about how I was going to approach it, what I would say, how I would keep my emotions in check, and how I would get my point across without losing my cool. I didn't want to shout or cry. I needed to be calm, collected, and firm in my resolve. I wasn't going to let her derail me with excuses or emotional manipulation. I had seen how she had been treating me, and I wasn't going to let her continue to act like nothing was wrong. The plan was simple. I would meet her in person, no distractions, and calmly tell her everything I knew. I would start by acknowledging how important our friendship had once been and how much I had tried to be understanding. I would express how much it hurt me to see her go behind my back, spreading lies, and pretending everything was fine when she was clearly playing a game. I would give her the opportunity to explain herself, but I already knew that the truth was undeniable. I wasn't expecting her to suddenly apologize or take responsibility. I wasn't going into this hoping for some miraculous change. What I needed was closure, and that's what I was determined to get. I wasn't going to let her make me feel guilty for standing up for myself. I had spent far too long pretending things were fine, trying to keep the peace when it was clear that the friendship was already over. I needed to stop being the one to carry the weight of the relationship, trying to keep everything intact when she had no intention of being honest or respectful. The day arrived, and I could feel the tension in the air. I had decided to meet her at a small cafe, a neutral place where we could talk without distractions. She had texted me that morning, as usual, asking if we could hang out. "I miss you," she wrote. "Let's catch up before graduation." Part of me wanted to ignore it, to not respond at all, but I knew this was my chance to finally have that conversation. I couldn't keep putting it off. This wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. I walked into the cafe with a sense of determination, trying my best to keep my nerves in check. When I saw her, she was already sitting at a table, looking at her phone. As I approached, she looked up with a smile and waved, completely unaware of the storm that was about to hit. I could almost feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me as I sat down across from her. For a brief second, I almost faltered, almost gave in to the urge to smile back and pretend everything was okay. But I quickly reminded myself why I was here. This wasn't about pretending anymore. It was time to face the truth. We exchanged pleasantries for a few moments, and then I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to say. "Listen," I began, my voice calm but firm. "I need to talk to you about something. This can't wait." She tilted her head, the smile fading slightly as she sensed the shift in tone. "What's wrong?" I paused for a moment, gathering my thoughts. This was the moment when everything would change, and I had to make it count. "I know about the Reddit posts. I've seen what you've been saying about me behind my back." Her eyes widened in surprise, and for a split second I saw the mask slip. She tried to recover quickly, but I could tell that my words had struck a nerve. She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed defensively. "What are you talking about?" she asked, trying to act confused. "I've seen everything," I continued, my voice steady. "I've seen the posts where you've lied about me, where you've twisted things to make me look like the villain. I'm not stupid. I know exactly what you've been doing, and I won't stand for it anymore." She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand to stop her. "I'm not here to argue or fight. I'm here because I need you to understand how hurtful this has been for me. You've been pretending everything was fine between us, but behind my back, you've been tearing me down. And I've had enough." For a moment, there was silence. I could see her processing what I was saying, the wheels turning in her head as she tried to figure out how to respond. Finally, she spoke, but it wasn't an apology. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said weakly, but I could hear the defensiveness in her voice. "I was just venting. I didn't think it would get back to you. I shook my head. That's not good enough. Venting is one thing, but trying to manipulate people into seeing me as the bad guy is something else entirely. I'm done pretending I don't know what's going on. The conversation continued, and while she didn't take full responsibility for her actions, I could feel the shift. The weight of everything I had been holding in was finally released. I wasn't going to let her control the narrative anymore. I wasn't going to keep pretending to be okay with being treated like I didn't matter. When I left that cafe, I felt a sense of relief that I hadn't felt in weeks. The truth was out, and I had finally stood up for myself. It wasn't the closure I had hoped for, but it was enough. I had taken back control. The day had finally arrived. The one I had been dreading, but also secretly anticipating. I had known for weeks that this conversation had to happen, but I had been putting it off, hoping that maybe things would resolve themselves or that I could find some way to avoid the confrontation altogether, but now there was no turning back. I had already gathered all the evidence I needed, prepared myself emotionally, and steeled myself for the hardest conversation of my life. I walked into the meeting place, my heart pounding in my chest. The cafe was quiet, a neutral spot where we could talk without distractions. She was already there, sitting at a table, her phone in hand, looking up as I approached. She gave me a warm smile, the same smile I had seen countless times over the years. But this time, there was something different in the air. The tension between us was palpable, even if she hadn't fully realized it yet. "Hey, it's good to see you," she said, her voice light, as though nothing had changed. But I could see the flicker of confusion in her eyes. She had no idea what was coming. I sat down across from her, taking a deep breath to steady myself. There was no going back now. I couldn't let her keep pulling the wool over my eyes. It was time to face the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it was. "We need to talk," I said, my voice calm but firm. She paused, sensing the seriousness in my tone. "What's going on?" she asked, her brow furrowing slightly. "I know about the Reddit posts," I began, getting straight to the point. "I've seen them. I know what you've been saying about me behind my back." For a moment she looked stunned, as though the words hadn't fully sunk in. Then her face tightened, and I saw the walls go up. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice shifting into defensive mode. "You're being dramatic." "I don't know what you mean." I didn't let her derail me. "I've seen the posts. I know you've been lying about me and making me out to be the villain. You've omitted important details, and you've been trying to manipulate people into thinking I am the one who is in the wrong. I don't know why you do that, but I'm not going to sit here and pretend I don't know what is going on." She shook her head, her eyes widening slightly. "I didn't mean for it to get back to you." "It's not like that," she said quickly, her tone now shifting to an almost apologetic defensiveness. "I was just venting. You know how I am when I get upset. It wasn't supposed to go this far, but I wasn't buying it anymore. It's more than just venting. You didn't just vent to your friends or keep it between us. You went online and made sure strangers knew your version of things. You deliberately left out key details to make yourself look like the victim, and I've had enough. You've been pretending everything is fine between us while you've been trashing me behind my back." She started to stammer, looking away for a moment as if she was trying to come up with an excuse. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said softly, her tone now almost pleading. "I've just been going through a lot, and I didn't know how to handle things." At this point, I could see where this was going. The same pattern I had seen before: the deflection, the denial, and now the empty apology. It was exactly what I had expected, but it didn't make it any easier to hear. Her words felt hollow, like she was apologizing because she thought she should, not because she truly understood the gravity of what she had done. "I don't think you really get it," I said, shaking my head. It's not just about the posts or the lies, it's the fact that you've been pretending everything is fine while you've been actively sabotaging our friendship. And I'm tired of being the one who is always trying to keep things together while you out there tearing me down." She looked down at the table, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm sorry," she repeated, her voice quieter now. "I shouldn't have done that. I was just angry and didn't know how to handle it." But I could tell that even if she was sorry, it wasn't enough. The damage had been done. I could feel the finality in the air, like a door had slammed shut. And no matter how much she apologized, it wouldn't change what had already happened. This friendship wasn't salvageable anymore. The trust had been shattered beyond repair, and I had reached a point where I couldn't go back. "I think it's time for us to go our separate ways," I said, my voice steady. "This friendship has run its course. I've tried to be understanding, but I can't keep pretending everything is okay when you've been treating me like this." Her face fell, and for a moment, I almost thought I saw regret in her eyes. But then she blinked, and the moment passed. "You really want to end things over this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't want to," I replied, feeling a knot form in my throat, "but I have to. I can't keep being treated like this. I can't keep pretending I'm okay with it." There was a long silence between us, and I could feel the weight of everything I had been holding inside finally lifting. I wasn't angry. I was sad. I was grieving the loss of a friendship I had once cherished. But as I sat there looking at her, I realized that letting go was the only choice I had left. "I hope you can understand," I said quietly, standing up to leave. "I hope you figure things out, but I can't be a part of it anymore." As I walked away, I felt a sense of clarity. The confrontation had been one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but it was also incredibly freeing. It was over. The toxic dynamic was broken, and I was finally free to move on. The aftermath wasn't pretty. In the days following our confrontation, she reached out to me repeatedly, each message more desperate than the last. At first, I thought maybe I'd misjudged her reaction, that perhaps she was genuinely regretful and trying to make amends. But as the messages continued, it became clear that she wasn't grasping the full weight of what had happened. Instead of taking responsibility for her actions, she kept circling back to the same plea. "Why can't you just forgive me? Why can't we just move on?" It was as if she was waiting for me to wave a magic wand and pretend everything was fine again, just because she said she was sorry. It felt like she was expecting me to forget all the hurt, all the manipulation, and all the lies she had spread behind my back. She wanted to act like nothing had happened, as if the damage hadn't been done. She was still trying to control the narrative, trying to get me to come back, to overlook everything, and to keep the friendship intact. But I had already made my decision. I was done. It hurt more than I ever expected it would. I had spent so much time invested in this friendship, trying to understand her, trying to be patient and supportive, even when my gut told me something was wrong. And yet, here she was, trying to manipulate me once again, to make me feel guilty for standing up for myself. It was like she couldn't accept that the dynamic between us had changed, that I wasn't going to let her treat me like that anymore. I could feel the emotional tug. Part of me wanted to give in, to go back to the way things were, to offer forgiveness and let everything slide. But I knew that doing so would only leave me stuck in a cycle of hurt and disappointment. I couldn't keep going back to the same toxic patterns. I couldn't let myself be manipulated anymore. I had to be strong, not for her, but for me. I had to let go, even if it meant accepting the painful truth that the friendship I once cherished had already run its course. The messages kept coming. "I miss you. Please talk to me," she would write, followed by, "I can't believe you're just going to throw everything away like this." And as much as I wanted to respond, to explain why it had to be this way, I knew that no explanation would be enough. She wasn't ready to accept the truth. She wasn't ready to own up to her actions. And as long as I kept engaging with her, I was only keeping the door open for more hurt. So, I made the decision to cut all communication. I didn't block her or make a dramatic exit. I simply stopped responding. I needed that space to breathe, to process everything, and to heal without being dragged back into the emotional whirlwind she was creating. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when I wondered if I had made the right choice. But deep down, I knew I couldn't continue to carry the weight of a friendship that had become a burden. Graduation day came, and I was surrounded by people who truly cared about me, friends, family, and even classmates who had supported me through the ups and downs of college. As I walked across that stage, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I had made it. And more than that, I had taken control of my own life again. I wasn't letting anyone else dictate my worth or how I should feel about myself. I had freed myself from a toxic relationship, and now I could move forward, ready to embrace whatever came next. The days after graduation were a blur of excitement and new beginnings. I spent time with people who lifted me up, who made me feel seen and valued for who I truly was. Slowly, I began to heal from the betrayal. The pain was still there, but it didn't define me anymore. I started focusing on my own growth, my own happiness, and learning how to trust again, this time, not just others, but myself. I had spent so much of my time trying to fix things, trying to salvage relationships that weren't meant to be. But once I let go of the toxic connections, I felt lighter, freer. I realized that sometimes, walking away isn't just about giving up, it's about taking control of your own life, your own peace. And in that moment, I understood that I had done the right thing. The truth had come out, and it was no longer buried under lies and manipulation. I had stood up for myself when it mattered most. I had taken back control of my story, and now I was moving on. And as I looked ahead, I knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter one where I could finally breathe, where I could surround myself with people who respected me, and where I wouldn't settle for anything less than the peace and happiness I deserved. Sometimes, the hardest part of letting go of a friendship is realizing that the person you thought you could trust was never really there for you. But taking control of your own story, confronting the lies, and cutting out toxic relationships is the ultimate form of self-care. Graduation marked the end of that chapter for me, and though it wasn't easy, it was necessary. If you're dealing with something similar, remember that your peace is worth more than any fake friendship. Don't be afraid to walk away from the people who don't have your best interests at heart.